Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Lisa Elvin Staltari, and I'm a genealogist and a passionate traveler. I have been doing Les Filles à Marier, the marriageable girls, since the beginning of this past year, and we are currently on episode 27. So we are moving right along. There's about 260 of them, so we've got a long way to go. Before we begin today's episode, let me show you ways you can support the channel. The first three keep you in the know: subscribe, like, and notify. The next couple of ways are ways to help the channel really grow. We have Coffee and Patreon, which are external platforms that you can have a look at for financial support. And we also have a super thanks that's right on your dashboard from YouTube. So if that's something you'd like to do, love to have you aboard. And for those of you who already are, thank you so much for your support. All right, let's get started and get to know our filles mariées of this episode. Review a little bit about Les Filles Mariées. Coming from 1634 to 1662, about 28 years, where they came individually, not as part of a group. They were chaperoned sometimes, and they came at the behest of a priest or a seigneur or someone else in the colony or someone else in France. But they were absolutely meant to come across and get married. They did not come with family or that sort of thing. There was about 262 of them, and they legitimately were extraordinarily brave and courageous women because they weren't part of any kind of big group. And they didn't know what they would have. And at the time, Quebec had just emerged from British rule, where the British had controlled them for a few years after France had lost Quebec for the first time. And so Quebec was just kind of gearing back up. So from, the first 1634 to about 1645, it was a very, very slow beginnings. It peaked in the 1650s and into early 1660s, but it was not enough to populate a colony, which is why Les Filles du Roi, the government program, came into being. But let's get to know these amazing women, these founding grandmothers, I call them, of Quebec and New France. Episode will feature Marie Ferra, and she is a viewer request. I do not have her in any of my files, so it was kind of a pleasure to get to know Marie a little bit better. So let's find out where Marie is from. Marie was born in 1644 in a place called, it's beautiful, Crève-Cœur-le-Grand in France. Her parents were Jean Ferra and Antoinette Hubert. You can see by the map on the upper left that she is from the region of France known as Hauts-de-France. And inside that region, on the upper right, on the bottom right here, map, you'll see the Hauts, the was, and that is the département or county that she is from. So you can kind of circulate where she's from. You can see that was is absolutely very close to the Île-de-France and very much closer to Paris. Let's talk a little bit about this Crève-Cœur-le-Grand. And in the center of this town is a 16th century castle, which you can see on the bottom left. It was originally a medieval fortress, largely rebuilt during the Renaissance, and the Château de Crèvecoeur was considered one of the most beautiful buildings of that time. It was then embellished with a very large park, and Admiral de Bonnivet owned it during the reign of François I, who stayed there in 1520 on his way to the Camp du Drap d'Or interview. Louis XIV spent a night there in 1680 in the North Tower, which collapsed the day after he slept there. And so you can see how historical this place is. And the former room occupied by King François I, with the fireplace that still exists, is used as a wedding celebration room. So guess what? If I ever get there, I definitely want to see this. So beautiful, beautiful, very elegant place that she comes from. After her parents' death, Marie would come to Canada in 1658. So the man that she would select and who would select her, his name was Jacques Géant de La Violette, Born in 1631 in Blois, France, his parents were Sébastien Géant and Jeanne Oudinot. Jacques was born in that commune of Blois. It's now found in the region of Centre-Val de Loire. You can see there in the second up to your left. The Centre-Val de Loire is truly, that's why it's called the center. It is in the center of France. And inside that, the Loire-et-Cher département. Blois is actually the capital of that département or county. Currently, there are about 45,000 people that live there, so it's no small little village. Here's a brief, very brief history of Blois. It was originally the capital of the county of Blois, which was created in 832 until it became part of France in 1498 when Count Louis II of Orleans became King Louis VII of France. Blois would be the official residence of the kings of France from the 15th to the 17th century. The church where he would have been baptized was Église Solemne, now called Saint Louis, is the capital. It dates from about the 11th century. And I put a picture here that I thought was nice because Jacques was a tanner. That was his profession. And that was what he did when he came to New France. So Jacques and September 24th, 1658 in Quebec City. And this is their marriage record. Where did they settle? As so many did before, they settled on Ile d'Orléans. Let's review a little bit about Ile d'Orléans. Frequent viewers to my channel know how often we visit here. Ile d'Orléans is located in the St. Lawrence River, about 3 miles east of downtown Quebec City. The island was one of the very first parts of the province to be colonized by the French, and a large percentage of French Canadians can trace their ancestry to the early residents of the island. The island has been described as the microcosm of traditional Quebec and as the birthplace of Francophones in North America. Officials later changed the name to Ile d'Orléans in honor of the second son of King Francis I, Henri II, who was the Duke of Orléans. The island was also known as Grande-Île, Sainte-Marie, and Saint-Laurent for certain periods in the 17th and 18th century. I also want to point out the map of Ile d'Orléans, or the sections, in the middle right of your screen. You can see that it is subdivided into 6 districts. And it's very important to know what district your family kind of settled at, so you'll know what church to go, where to kind of feel that, because they're very distinctive. So we have Saint-François at the very tip of the island. We have Saint-Jean, Saint-Laurent, Sainte-Patronille at the other end tip. And then we have Saint-Pierre and Saint-Famille. You'll notice that Saint-Famille is actually the one closest. It's the largest. It was the oldest and then the first that was built. So most people would start off in Saint-Famille and gradually make their way to another place. Now let's have a look at the 1666 and 1667 census. The 1666, we have Jacques. He's a tanner that we talked about. Marie. So there's about a 10-year gap, at least in this census. We have Jacques Jean, their 4-year-old son, and there's an Élie who's 20 years old, and he's a printer, and for some reason he is engaged. He's an engagé, which means he's working out his engagement, his contract. The next one on the bottom is the 1667 census, and we have Jacques, who's still 30, Marie Ferra, who's somehow grown to 23, and we have Jacques, who's still 4, and then we have Marie, who's 10 months old. They have 1 tête de bétail, which is a cow, and they have 12 arpents malades, which is about 9 to 10 acres of land. Family grows, they would have in all 11 children. Louise would die in infancy. Jacques would marry Anne Trépanier and have 16 children, 9 of whom would make it. Jean would die at 1 year of age. Marie would marry Jean Bilodeau and have 8 children, 5 of whom would make it. Elizabeth would die at 1 year of age. Hippolyte died at 18. Jeanne would die at 16. Catherine would become a nun with the Notre Dame Congregation. Elizabeth would would marry Pierre Athénée and have 4 children, unfortunately, none of whom would survive. François would die at age 17, and Geneviève would die at age 3. This is one of the saddest family groups that I've seen in a very long time. So not many of their children would survive. And now let's have a look at the 1681 census. We have Jacques, who's now 50. Marie, his wife, is now 40. So now there's that 10-year gap. Enfin, they have Jacques, who's 19. Marie, who's 15. Hippolyte, who's still alive at that point, 10 years of age. Jeanne, Catherine, Elizabeth. They have 1 gun. They have 10 goats. And by now, they have 25 arpents valeurs. So they have about 20 to 22 acres of land. A lot of growth has happened there. Finally, Jacques would die in April of 1699. He was buried on April 4th. He was 68 years old. At the time of his death, he and Marie had been married a very, very long 41 years. Marie would then bury her son, François, 1 month later. We're thinking that they were victims of an unnamed epidemic, and that is just so sad. Marie herself would die in 1713 at the age, remarkably, of 79 years of age. And she was buried on February 17th, 1713. She and Jacques would end up having, by 1729, 106 descendants. Isn't that amazing, given the fact that there were so many of their children who passed away? So I just think that's a remarkable life, and I'm just fascinated to know how many of you are descendants of this couple. For their efforts, it's a final tribute. They're there on the island of Orleans, on the monuments of the founding families. There is Jacques-Jeanne de la Violette, Marie Ferra. Their spelling isn't what we would think. And they're in Saint Famille as of 1660. So that dates their origin as to when they settled, if you will, on the island. As always, I love to recommend resources. Let's focus in. There's so many of them, and I've listed all of their for you to explore, the societies, WikiTree. Let's focus in on Maple Stars and Stripes. It's a podcast, and I'm about to get on a trip, a road trip, so I'll be listening to Maple Stars and Stripes on my trip. So that, even though I've listened to them so many times before, they're incredible. And Sandra Goodwin is the moderator, and it's just a remarkable lady, and has done so much for the French Canadian Genealogy Society. So I would urge you to check that out. There's a website and a podcast, so check that out, please, to further your understanding of New France. And so we end episode 27 of Les Filles Mariées. Marie Ferra was truly a remarkable woman in so many ways. Most notably, the fact that she was an early pioneer of Ile d'Orléans, that makes her unique, but also what she endured, the loss of all those children. Just, I can't even fathom it. But yet she managed to live to a ripe old age of 79 for that period. Was just remarkable. She had to bury a husband and a son within a month of each other. The strength and the stamina and just that toughness of that lady, I feel it in my bones. So for all that she contributed, for all that she sacrificed, we bless her memory, and we are grateful that she came to our shores. And I also want to have a shout out to my patrons and supporters who are wonderful to me and support me in my endeavors, and it's ever growing. So thank you so much for being there for me on a monthly basis, and also just dropping a line here and there. Appreciate any and all communication. Thank you so much. And until I see you on episode 28, I will bid you adieu and au revoir.